Puzzling particles plague PETG prints, Prusa's print head perpetually pukes plastic, and droopy details drag down Flashforge's delivery. All this and more, PrintFix Friday, episode 194. Boy, you've been traveling a lot lately. Let's get into it. Starting off, we've got a PETG print here, and the user is asking, what causes these speckles? You know how I tell you it's not wet filament, and I sound like Dr. House, where it's not lupus?
It's never lupus.
Then that one time it was lupus? It's lupus. We have damp PETG. This is what's occurring here. It's a very easy thing to spot because it occurs more than once per layer, it occurs more than once per movement, and it is a more of a random pattern. Why does wet filament cause this problem? It's pretty simple. Water likes to boil at 100 degrees Celsius. Your hot end is around 240 degrees Celsius. More than double what it takes to boil water. So as soon as that moisture that is stuck inside of that filament touches 240 plus degrees Celsius, it says nope! And that causes this kind of a bubble, a pop, a cavitation that you see in these prints. It is a really easy thing to fix. Just dry your filament and life will be good. This, other than looking all that kind of rough on the exterior, doesn't have too many other issues print-wise. We can see that, maybe their cooling could be a little bit better. We've got a couple of drooped overhangs, but we're not gonna be that picky. The print looks totally fine otherwise. So I would definitely look at drying out that filament, rerunning the print, maybe turning up the cooling a little bit, but you know, an X-Acto knife takes care of those problems pretty well too, in my experience at least. But living in Florida, we deal with moisture all the time. How do we deal with it? Because you notice that we have filament out all the time. And in fact, that roll right there is TPU and it's completely out. We dry all of our filament before we use it. We have combinations of different dryers, including old school Sunlu S1s. We have a few of the S2s. We have an S4. And Ibos just sent me a new dryer that fits on top of the AMS in a bamboo, which can dry up to 4 spools at once. If you guys want to see more about that, let me know. But we've just kind of given up here. We could absolutely keep the room dehumidified, and on average, we were pulling 40 to 80 liters of water out of this room a day in moisture alone. And no matter what we did, this room would be well over 40 degrees Celsius at sub 15% ambient humidity. So we solved it by just not caring and drying the filament before we go to use it. But this is something that can happen even with brand new spools. Do not assume that because the spool is brand new, that it's dry. Yes, a lot of manufacturers, especially if you're buying from USA-made companies like Printed Solid, Polar Filament, Atomic, and others, are going to have higher standards than you're gonna get from your bottom-of-the-barrel $10 or less a kilo filament from shoddy Amazon sellers. But it's not impossible to get a damp roll from everybody. The best thing to do with hygroscopic materials like PETG is just to dry it. Drying it is not going to hurt it. Yes, it adds a little bit of excess power usage to your bill, but it is better than having to redo a print. You will see some reduced layer adhesion because, well, you've got air pockets in your prints, but you're not really gonna see anything other than a bit of a nasty surface on this part. So as long as it's more for go and not for show, this part's fine. And otherwise, looks pretty good. Little bit of VFAs, but given that's a smooth corner, it can be expected, especially on certain machines. Speaking of VFAs, I get some very fine artifacts in my back from hiking lots, and if you want to see those kinds of things, you can do so by joining our Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and at the $5 tier and higher, you'll get some extra access into behind-the-scenes content, including hours of 360 footage that we've shot while in Sweden and in Colorado, some of which was on the Electric Ranch. You know, Scotty from Strange Parts, where he lives. You know where those links are. But my name's Grant, this is 3D Musketeers, we help you get your prints back to printing with purpose. This is PrintFix Friday. The whole goal of this series is to make it so you don't have downtime, and questions like this get answered relatively fast. So if you have any issues with your printers, you can submit them to us. Our favorite ways for you to make a video and tag us on YouTube, and we'll get that little notification. Just tag us in the description of the video, and we'll get a notification of it, and we can show it on the show. Otherwise, you can Hit us up on the social medias, tag us in posts, or, slide into those DMs if that's your kind of thing. We're always here to help. It doesn't cost a dime. Leaving a like and get subscribed doesn't either. It helps the channel grow. Moving on to our next issue, we've got burned blobs on a Mark 3S Plus, a Prusa printer, which are very, very near and dear to my heart. They use the OG V6 from E3D. And while this one is not an official V6, this one is. It just looks better on camera, so we use one with the kind of weird gold heatsink. These are a multi-piece hot end where everything comes apart. I know for those of you that are used to newer machines might not know that this was a thing. We used to be able to replace every single part on our printers as they failed. Heat sinks, heat breaks, nozzles, heat blocks, everything was an individual candy part. We've kind of strayed away from what I think was probably a easier to service design, but it had one fatal flaw. If you changed out your nozzle and you did not tighten the nozzle up against the heat break, not against the heat block, but against the heat break, you would get leaking. That is what we have here. They're printing Jesse PLA from Printed Solid. We absolutely love Printed Solid at 195C, 200 on the first layer. A little cold for Jesse in our experience, but hey, if it works, it works. And they're seeing these blobs of burnt filament on all of their prints, regardless of the filament roll used. They assume it's related to a filament leak from the hot end area, but honestly, they're not sure, and they're not sure how to fix it. They've got it right. This is absolutely from the hot end area. It happens when your nozzle is not seated up against your heat break and hot tightened. You have to make sure on the old V6s that you tighten everything when it's hot, because metal expands as it gets hot. So you want to tighten it real tight. If it goes loose, you've tightened it too much, okay? You want to use the German metric of Guten tight, making sure that it's set right. If you did change out your nozzle and now your nozzle is touching the heat block, you need to get that fixed. You need to go ahead and loosen up your nozzle a little bit. You can actually just take off the entire heat sink if you want, because it makes it easy, and then tighten the heat break down onto the nozzle. E3D recommends between 1 and 2 turns loose on the nozzle for the heat break to go ahead and tighten against it. Then you can tighten the nozzle again. Unlike more common hot ends that we're seeing these days, this is also not a one-handed job. You need to hold the block with one and then tighten with the other. This has to be done at temperature, so be careful. Use pliers, don't short out your wires. If you have ceramic tools, those are obviously the best because they are non-conductive, but just be careful. Know that the parts are not very expensive if you do run into issues, even if you buy legitimate, but because this was one of the last open source hot ends that we saw from E3D, there are decent clones of this available online for relatively cheap, this one being one of those clones. We try not to run clones in the shop, but it's just something that you end up with over the years before you really understand the engineering that goes into companies. And that brings up something that I'd like to ask you all. What do you feel about clones? Is it, I don't really care, I just want the best price as long as the quality is good? Or do we have to set a standard here that we shouldn't support companies that just steal the intellectual property of others to make a quick buck? Love to know your thoughts down in those comments. Have you experienced this kind of thing? Literally, this hot end suffered from it. Yeah, you can kind of see it. You can see between the heat block and the heat sink that there is a little bit of plastic in there. It happens. It's a totally normal thing that can happen on these hot ends if you don't do it perfectly right every single time. What do you guys think? Are we cool with clones, or is this more of a Clone War situation?
Roger, 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 roger.
My wallet knows what it wants, but me as a business owner, I want to support the companies that also make this industry possible, so let me know your thoughts. Moving on to some weird printer artifacts here. We've got some wavy lines on a part, and this one can be a little bit interesting. You might say, well, Grant, you covered this literally last week or the week before. It all has to do with heat. I'd say, young grasshopper, you have missed something key in this part. We have a seam, and we have a seam here as well. The seam denotes that something else is happening. Instead of it not being hot enough and creating ripples, this part here also shows that it's not extruding at all. This is likely right before it starts a new layer. This is pressure advance. Pressure advance is very complicated, but the easy thing that you need to understand as a user is that pressure advance stops extruding before you get to a corner or any seam at all, and then starts back up again. That's what pressure advance does. It deals with the back pressure inside of the hot end so that you're not over extruding when you're doing that wait command to go ahead and move up to the next layer. Because even though it might seem instant to you, to back pressure, it's not instant at all. What we've got going on here is that the machine is stopping to extrude way before it gets to the end of the line. So we can see that we're stopping to extrude maybe somewhere back here. Back pressure is failing. Now it has fully failed and we're just dealing with a little bit of ooze coming out of the nozzle. It goes for the retract here, or at least the move, and then keeps going. This could be on the start of the line as well, and it would still be a pressure advance problem. It's kind of funny. The easy way to deal with this is to run a pressure advance test. Orca Slicer can do this natively. It's a very simple thing to do, and you can run it right on your machine, right from Orca. Oftentimes, printers will be somewhere in like the 0.05 region, so if you're just trying to find a generic pressure advance to use, 0.05 is often good for direct drive printers. Bowden, totally different story, and will vary heavily based on how long the Bowden tube is. But that is often what causes this. If it is at the start of a line and does go through more than just the exterior perimeter, we could have issues with our stepper motor not actually grabbing the grub screw and the gear itself for the extruder. That is so often a problem on old school printers that it was one of our first things to go to when we looked at 3D printer failures. I don't believe it's that big of a deal anymore because of the way manufacturers are moving away from direct drives where the stepper motor is directly driving the filament and instead using things like planetary gear reductions to have faster stepper motors, which will get you better positional accuracy overall, but higher torque because of the planetary gear reduction. So I don't think that's the problem here, but if it is an older Ender or a machine that utilizes a gear or a hobbed gear directly on a stepper motor, check to make sure that the grub screw is tight. I don't think it's the problem, but I'd rather put it out there for those that are dealing with something similar and might have an older machine and not know exactly what could cause it. I believe this is pressure advance though. I'm almost positive it is. If you have any thoughts on this, let me know, because this appears to be at the end of a line before they're starting a new perimeter. We can see the start looks totally fine, a little bit of VFA, but again, kind of normal on a rounded edge like that. But this at the end makes sense. The reason we don't see it all the way up is we can see this Z-seam goes away. The Z-seam has moved somewhere else on the part. If you are dealing with this problem and you don't want that to happen, just draw your own Z-seam or put it to the rear of the part so you'll know exactly where the Z-seam is. Hope it helps. Next up from the Ender 3 Reddit, we have Benchy. Friend sold me his V1 3 years ago, and it's a storage printer. They're using Marlin 1.0.1, old school. Why does it print like this? It's because it's clogged. So we've got a clogged system, whether that is a clogged nozzle, clogged extruder, clogged PTFE tube, clogged liner, could be a broken extruder, could be a lot of things. As much as I loved those Gen 1 Ender 3s when they came out, because they really did bring 3D printing down to an affordable price point, I'm not certain that they're really worth a lot of trouble in 2025 or later. They're not bad printers, but they suffer from a lot of, let's go with value engineering terminology, things like just having the Bowden tube go all the way into the hot end, you know, where it gets hot. So that means your Bowden tube now becomes a part that needs to be replaced because it's a wear item way faster than it normally would need to be replaced if it was just a tube to feed filament through. The extruders are notorious for cracking on their non-toothed side. So Ender extruders have a toothed gear that is attached directly to the stepper motor, and then there is an idler bearing that is on a ridiculously strong spring. I believe it's actually one of the same springs they use to level the bed. While that does bring down your cost of production because it's the exact same screw, it is often way too much pressure even at its lowest setting. So it's something to be aware of, and that those can crack. The best thing that you can do is upgrade to a BMG extruder. Heck, go direct drive if you want. If you're willing to spend the money, we highly recommend to use Bondtech extruders, which we were recently at Bondtech. in Sweden. I tried surströmming. You can watch me suffer.
Oh, so bad!
But we did raise money for the Barncancerfonden, the Swedish Children's Cancer Foundation. We raised over 10,000 Swedish crowns during a, 2-hour stream. So thank you to all of you that did show up to this random stream in the middle of the morning and be able to open your wallets and donate to a cause that you probably didn't even know about until we started talking about it. So thank you to all of you that made that happen. And if you do want to watch me suffer eating through some ridiculous Swedish candy, thank you, Andres. You can go watch that stream. But we also did a live stream with the Index. We did a Mother's Day podcast live from Bontech as well. And of course, there's a ton of extra content coming out because Jacob was with us. And Jacob brought some fancy lenses so we can show you what 0.056 microns looks like through a camera lens. If you want to see more things like that, where we go places, do live shows, and show you brand new technology that you might have never seen before, make sure to leave a like, get subscribed, and let us know in those comments, who else would you like us to go tour and film with and maybe do a live podcast? That was a lot of fun, just bringing in random people from Bontech to interview them, even though none of them gave up the secrets we wanted to know. Love you guys. We've got a Flashforge here saying, how would you fix this? They tried slowing down both kinds of supports. What else should they try? So we've got the underside of our models looking like poop. This is a pretty difficult thing to deal with if you're running out of cooling. Here's the fun problem. When your printer is doing these underhangs, areas of a sphere that are on the underside, the underboob of the print, you have to make sure you have enough cooling for the heat that you're trying to extrude at. If you're not able to cool down your hot end during those movements, which currently most software is not able to do, and most hot ends can't heat up and cool down that fast, except for just one that I'm aware of that will be commercially available soon, the Bontech Index. This was not specifically to do more shoutouts for Bontech, but work with what you got. You will have to just cool the part really, really well. You can look at lowering the temperature for the entire print, but you might not get the layer adhesion that you're looking for. If you're running out of cooling, you don't have any more cooler fan, if you have an auxiliary part cooling fan, that's at 100 and you're still experiencing this, turn down your temperatures. If even turning down your temperature still gets you to experience these issues, I would question whether or not your temperatures are low enough, and if you're at like 180 and still experiencing this, something else is wrong. Now, I don't think that's the case here, especially because we've got a silk print here for the second photo, and the silk is still shiny, which means we are quite warm, because silk is often a PLA and TPU mix, which we showed you when we made it at Printed Solid, which we're card to, so you guys can take a look. TPU likes to be hotter than regular PLA. So when you extrude silk filament and you don't extrude it a little bit warmer, it tends not to be as shiny as you expect. But for this, it doesn't appear to be a silk filament. The photo could be a little deceiving, and maybe it is. But I would look at lowering the temperatures, increasing the cooling if you have any more to give, and if all else fails, put a freaking fan next to the printer. More cooling, more better, especially for PLA. Yes, you can technically overcool PLA, but the vast majority of you are not dealing with that kind of an issue yet, so let's not go down that path just yet. But I'd like to know, on stock machines, I'm guessing this is going to be like an AD5M, AD5X, or some other Flashforge machine, how would you solve this problem? For me, I'm going to slow it down, cool it down, and hope that it works. But if it persists, you kind of run out of options and are forced to look at other ways to add cooling to your parts. This is not an issue that we see much anymore, and can absolutely be due to having the wrong temperatures for the wrong filament, like ABS temps running PLA. But with the advent of RFID and spools and things like that, those that don't want to learn as much as they could and just want it to work, they want an appliance, they want a machine, they don't want a hobby, that kind of problem is going away, especially for newbies. RFID filament will remove one of those steps that could leave you puzzled for so long because everything should be right, when in reality, it was the wrong filament that was loaded into the machine. It's happened to us. We've shown it on PrintFixFriday in the past. It's happened to you. let us know. And how did you catch it? I've caught it because it clearly didn't look right. I checked the spool, it said it was CF nylon, but then I looked a little closer and I realized I had respooled CF PETG onto the spool, written on a black spool in black Sharpie, CF PETG, and like a big dummy, didn't cross out the CF nylon. Mistakes were made, lost a bit of money, but hey, I learned a valuable lesson. Which is, don't use black Sharpie on a black spool. Use a silver Sharpie. And if you do want to have your name listed right next to me in silver, technically it's white, but editor, magic. Now they're silver. See, isn't that cool? You can do so by joining the $5 tier higher, and a $10 tier higher, you get to come join our private Discord server where we do our best to help you get your printers back to printing with purpose with one-on-one support. Hope you guys have enjoyed it, and a huge thank you goes out to all of those channel members, because without them, videos like this wouldn't be possible. That's all we have for you all today. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your lovers. Don't forget to leave a like and get subscribed. And as always, keep making awesome. Have a good one.